Hello and welcome to the Animation Communication Podcast, for your source of discussion about animation, film, fandom, and more. So please join our host, I Love Kim Possible a Lot, or KP, and Lyle Convoy, or Lyle Manbad. This episode contains some mild adult language.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Animation Communication. We're recording a bunch of them at the same time, so I don't know what number it is. It doesn't matter, whatever. I guess we'll probably have a lot of OG Brodies listening because I'm sure they're going to be like, the nostalgia. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. In case you don't know, I Love Kim Possible a Lot. I go by KP. I go by Rachel. If people are like, I got a lot of professional industry people that's like, what do I call you, Kim Possible Lady? And I'm just like, oh no, regret. Whatever floats your boat. I just ask, don't call me Rachel unless you don't find me at a con and call me Rachel. Like, I don't know you, person at a con, Anyway, with me, I have, Ink Rose. Can I also call you Anya? Does it matter?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't like fake names too, so you can also call me Rachel, whatever feels more natural. Anya, sorry, I should know this. It's Anastasia.
That's okay. That's okay.
But anyway, Anya, why don't we talk a little bit about some flashback stuff, because I'm sure that's what this nostalgia miners are mining for. So, I don't know, you were like my very first collab, right? In 10 years ago, something like that?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I remember when we would chat over Skype and stuff and let's collab over this. Let's do this. This sounds like fun.
How old were you? You were I remember you were the baby, so you must have been 16, right?
I started at 16. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I figured. So I was 19, 20, so I was still kind of baby, but yeah, we were all babies. Anyway, for those who don't know, Anya was in the My Little Pony fandom with me back in the day. So, you want to talk a little bit about that, how that started and how you kind of gained your audience that way, and we can go from there?
Oh, yeah. So the way it kind of started was, I was just kind of getting into the show at around that point, and the reason why I liked it was because I really liked the art style, the animation of it. I was someone who used to play with G3 ponies when I was a kid, and so when I saw the G4 designs, I was immediately hooked. I was like, wow, these look really sleek and interesting and have really nice shape design. And when I found out it was Lauren Faust who did these other shows and worked on Powerpuff Girls and stuff, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Her art style is really cool. So from there, I just got into the show. I would watch YouTube videos about it, and I saw this video by Brony Curious, who was also big in the fandom at the time.
Oh, and the flashbacks. Uh-huh. Yeah, Tommy's been it's been a hot minute, but he was on the podcast maybe a year or two ago talking about something similar we're going to talk about, because he also branched into 3D animation after his thing. So
yeah. And he's been doing some really cool stuff with that, with his Azumi character.
Right, yeah. The pony people either, from what I've gathered, have kind of either died off, or they're kind of doing what we're doing, where they're expanding their brand, or they just stop making content altogether. So it's an interesting, I feel I'm an old lady who's just back in the pony day. We had G4 and we liked it.
Uh-huh. It was simple, but it was great. And with I had seen his video on the origins of Celestia and Luna and the history of Equestria, and I had my own ideas on theories on what I thought would be really cool. So I kind of did a response.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have to translate for the normies. So can you go into detail what is an Equestria and what is Luna?
Sure. So basically, Brony Curious, he had made this video about the kind of history of the pony world and potentially the origins of the queens of the land, the princesses. And I had kind of my own ideas of where it might have come from, because I sort of had my own thoughts on what I thought would be the coolest origin for them in my 16-year-old brain, of course.
I mean, don't we all? Like,
yeah.
Are like the start of all creativity, let's be honest.
Of course. And so I made kind of my own ideas of like, oh, but what if it was this, and like what if this happened, and I basically just wrote like a fan fiction of how I thought it'd be like cool if what the origin of Celestia and Luna were, and it was like complete fan fiction, like not really based too much on what was really in the show, just what I thought would be cool. And that video ended up getting like really popular, and it's still like the highest viewed video on my channel. I think it has 9 million views now.
And I think too, like, it was also about your presentation. Like, instead of you were just like, "This is my headcanon," you kind of told it like as a story, like a narrative story.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big appeal too of it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why it ended up resonating. I think especially with a lot of younger people that were around my age or younger. I've had a lot of people like come back to me years later and say stuff like, "Oh, I used to watch your channel when I was a kid, and I thought that your headcanons were like the real stuff." And I was like, "Oh no,
you're corrupting the children."
Oh no. Yeah, it's like, oh, that's really that's so sweet, like that they liked them that much, that it became like part of their childhood like experience of the show. So it's really fun to look back on those stories that in hindsight might seem silly, but honestly, like a lot of it was me practicing my own creative writing abilities, and like by being able to use the show's characters and making these like stories with them, and like theory crafting and world building on my own, and it ended up helping equip me with the tools that I needed to make my own worlds and my own backstories and characters and all of that stuff. And I'm still kind of like using those skills today when I'm writing and making new things.
And especially too, like, I think a lot of children who kind of want to do still things that are similar to what we're doing, like over focus on, I mean, the art's important, like becoming a good draftsman is important, but there's also like story structure and narrative flow and like all those like tropes that I think are also important. Like, I don't think people really think of like what makes a good story. I think sometimes they're just like, well, what if I draw this really well? I'm just like, yeah, but that's only like part of the picture, you know? Like, if you want to be a good, like if you want to be a good story writer, like on all accounts, then you kind of need a little bit of A, a little bit B to kind of like make sure you're well-rounded. So
And especially when it comes to being an indie creator, indie creators have to do a lot of different things sometimes, because they don't have a team.
Indie creator is just in case.
So to me, an indie creator is someone who is kind of doing some of these creative endeavors on their own. They don't have a large corporation or company backing them. It's usually them and either just themselves or themselves and a small team working with them.
Yeah, so that's can you like go a little bit into what Kickstarter is and stuff, like for
sure.
how funding works for that?
So a lot of indie games, not all, but many will choose to use crowdfunding as a source of, and not just games, also like board games will do this, comic book artists will do this, of using crowdfunding in order to fund their creative endeavors. Their so Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Fig, those are all sites that use crowdfunding to help fund these creations. A lot of times what Kickstarters will do, I'm just kind of using Kickstarter as a catch-all term for crowdfunding.
Yeah, there's a couple of others for those making notes, I guess.
They will tend to be timed, and usually around 30 days is the ideal. And they will ask people to donate money in order to help fund it, because a lot of indie people don't have a lot of money to fall back on to pay their employers or their employees or their friends that are helping work on their projects. And so they need external help to do so. And getting funding from a large company is really hard. If
Yeah, I was gonna we can talk about that because I know you have
Yep.
experience with that. So
Oh yeah.
oh
It's
yeah, a
really
single
hard.
tear drips down face.
Yeah. And it's hard getting a publisher. It's hard securing funding in major dollars. For one, usually because you're not established enough for companies to want to take a risk on you. And two, because this stuff is expensive. And
For
so,
sure.
like I said, yeah, it's a risk. So if you have the average Joe, become the person that helps to fund you, there's someone who may already be a fan of yours, potentially, who wants to invest in you and see you grow as a creator. And that can be extremely gratifying as a creator when you see that there's these fans, these people that want to support you monetarily, because that's kind of an ultimate form of support for it, is to actually give over the hard-earned money that they have to help you grow. So it's incredibly amazing and sweet whenever people decide to support you in that way, which is why Kickstarter can be a really, really cool and really awesome place, but also very disappointing place when those creators don't use that money properly, or they maybe have issues with organization or that kind of thing.
Can I just be blunt and say what I think you might be saying? It's going to be a little crude, but I think I know what you're getting at.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they stick their dick in places they're not supposed to, essentially.
Oh yeah, Like they don't have any experience in something, and it can end up being a scam sometimes, like straight up a scam where they literally just take the money and run, which is why crowdfunding can be so risky. But also because it's so risky, you can end up getting extremely good things out of it when you invest in the right people. And sometimes it's hard to know exactly to invest in the right people. I would say some really good examples of crowdfunding ended up being A Hat in Time, which is a cute 3D platformer made by the company Gears for Breakfast. It started with one guy, and they ended up having a crowdfunding that worked out super well and made it a really fun, cute game. Another game that seems to have worked out quite well is Coral Island, which is a farming simulator, Stardew Valley type of game. I don't know if it's out yet. I think betas or alphas are, but that was an incredibly successful Kickstarter.
Can you define what a beta and alpha is? Because I don't even know what that is.
Got you. Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. An alpha and beta of a game are basically two ways of describing where in development a game is. Alphas are usually early builds, like stuff that is very unfinished. Like you'll see maybe some grass patches here, but then an untextured cube over there to represent an asset that has not been made yet. An asset being, like an object in the game that hasn't been made. And then a beta is something that is getting close to done and is ready for more serious testing from the beta testers, or sometimes funded games will choose to let their fans help test the game and get beta builds of the game in order to get their feedback as they're working on it. So beta builds will be much closer to being finished. In fact, they may, depending on the company, they may already be finished but just need tweaks here and there before release. And so releasing alphas and betas to supporters is a great way to show how much progress you've made and have them physically be able to actually play what you've been working on. And that's a great way to show trust, to build trust in your company, and get people more excited for what's to come.
Oh yeah, I mean, and two, it sounds like a lot of just essentially fancy words for focus group testing, right?
In a sense, yeah. But what's cool about that is it's very personalized, because every player is going to have a different experience in the game, and especially when you're able to record that experience, you can gain a lot of insight. And for me personally, with my game, the fantastic Kitty Roo, we were able to get some extremely good feedback for when people would play it on Twitch and stuff, so they could record their reactions.
Oh,
So yeah,
smart. Gotta get that hustle, girl.
yeah, it was great because I basically was used these sites like Lurkit, which is a key mailing site, and key mailing sites they are how do I describe this? Like to get a digital copy of the game on a platform like Steam or Epic Games, you can generate keys, which are like numbers of lines of random numbers that you can activate. They're like little codes that add the game to your library, and you can use these key mailing sites to give free copies of your game to content creators and streamers who will get your game for free in exchange for them playing it on their stream and helping to promote it in that way. So it's like a win-win situation where they get free stuff and you get them to play your game on stream and get more eyes on it.
Yeah, that's actually how we had another guest who, the reason this is not the indie game podcast, it's more going to be about 3D animation and some more details about that than we did with Tommy, is we already had basically what you described, where I had an indie company reach out and say, hey, I saw, like, I love the Edith Finch game, which is another kind of indie, kind of like, it's a decently big studio from what I know, but it's a Giant Sparrow. I don't know if you played Edith Finch, but yeah, if you have
Edith Finch?
Yeah.
Oh, I have. I really like that game actually.
Oh yeah,
it's very good.
Like I'm not even a game person, but I did a video about it, and this other company based in France saw my Edith Finch game, and they're just like, hey, we're doing an indie game. Do you want a free Steam code? And I'm like, yeah, free things. And so I played it and I loved it because you should play it. I can probably hook you up if you want, but it's called The Wreck, and it's basically similar to Edith Finch, where it has really, 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 really great narrative dialogue and really deep character. Like, they thought through this shit. Like, I could tell you before I had them, it was just like, you guys thought like every angle of these characters, and like there's also it's a kind of a your experience with the game, it doesn't really influence the plot per se, similar to Edith Finch, but basically if you click on information, you get more context to the plot. It just depends on how fast you want to finish the game, or if you want those that lore, that sweet lore essentially. So, I mean, of course, knowing me, I wanted all the lore, and, like, I think it was a 6 or 7 hour playthrough, but if you were doing a speed run, you could probably get it done in, like, 1 or 2. I'm just gonna kind of pull up a trailer for you later.
Oh, sweet.
But, basically, at the ending, without giving it too much away, you get to choose the end of the story, based on what you learn about the characters and the plot. Again, I'm trying to be clever not to give it away, but it's a pretty big decision, and there's like, you get a lot of context about, like, you know, both sides of the argument essentially. There's 3 choices, and you get a lot of context, and like you could justify either of these 3 decisions pretty well based on the context you get. But you know, it was cool. So I played it. I was just like, hey guys, you want to be on the podcast? I love this. So, yeah, I think it'd be right up your alley personally. And there's also, this is not too big of a spoiler, but there's also a How to Train Your Dragon reference in there, which I wasn't expecting at all. So, but his name is Harold, not Hiccup, just because of a translating error. So, you know, as long as you know that going in.
Heck yeah.
But, I don't even know what we're talking about. Yeah, so indie games are cool, and, like, you know, it's, like, they have to be kind of clever with their marketing. But essentially, you know, it all comes down to being a content creator that people feel like they can trust you with, especially with monetary things, and invest. Because we both have creative people in our circle, and we both have, like, I've heard stories of people who know people who, like, I'm going to start a Kickstarter, and then, like, you know, they don't have their shit together, and they're like, yep, I'm going to steal $50,000. And then their creative reputation is... Bush Hartman, but their creative reputation is ruined because they basically had this great, like, all ambition, no execution, you know? So
Oh, exactly. And I will say, I was a bit victim to that myself in terms of I had a Kickstarter a while ago for I wanted to make an animated pilot for my Spectral Lakes IP. And I was not someone who was the expert in animation. What I thought I would be doing was directing, writing, doing the storyboards, and doing some animating, character designs, etc. But in hindsight, I should have done more animation experience before I tried to do a Kickstarter of making an animated pilot.
What were you trying? Were you trying to animate in Flash?
Yeah. Basically, I had wanted to do a Kickstarter to try to fund being able to pay like other people to animate it. And
you gotta get. I mean, I've learned that too. Sometimes you just gotta get your hands dirty. Like, and at least like,
exactly.
If you don't know the technicality, then you sit and you like work through it, and you say, well, I'll So at least the other party knows that you're investing the same exact time as they are, and they can,
exactly.
Like, you're down in the trenches with them. You're not just like, oh, you do it, I'm gonna go take a nap.
Like, I knew I was gonna help work on it, but I thought that me being in the role of storyboard artist, director, character designer, writer, right? All of that, I thought that would be enough. But honestly, in hindsight, it was just kind of ignorant, and like I should have just tried more of like doing the animation myself. And I had done like a sample animation piece, but it was very it wasn't that great. I needed to practice more on it before trying to have a whole Kickstarter. Like, why would people give me money when I couldn't really show much of anything that was of quality? I was so desperate to try to get it done as a show that that's what I'd ended up doing was trying to do the Kickstarter, but like it didn't end up working, and rightly so. I don't think it made sense to really invest in it.
Yeah, I think too. Like, I mean, that might be a good segue to pitching, because like I know I don't know how much you want to give away, but I know your family has some kind of professional background, so they have a little bit more experience than just a layman as far as dealing with studios. So if you want to talk about a little bit of, if you want to talk, I'm talking fast. If you want to talk a little bit about that, or whatever you feel comfortable like disclosing, and then kind of like, just your general pitch process as far as, how that political atmosphere works, because I'm curious myself.
Oh, well, in terms of the experience that my parents have, we used to live in like the LA area, but things were not like, my dad like worked in voice acting, basically. Like he's done like a couple voices on various shows. Like he did like a few voices on Pinky and the Brain, and a few other shows as well. It's all on like his IMDb and stuff.
If memory serves, he was also Jiminy Cricket in Kingdom Hearts, right?
Yep.
There you go.
Specifically in Kingdom Hearts Recoded, I believe, and I think like 365 and a half days. Like
a bunch of days.
Basically 2 DS games. He was Jiminy Cricket in 2 DS games, and then he did a few other like little stuff with Jiminy Cricket here and there. But because Jiminy isn't like a very like a well-used character in the modern landscape of Disney, there weren't like that many jobs at that point. And at some point, my dad unfortunately had to quit voice acting because it legitimately was not getting him any much of a paycheck that could help us like survive in California. Because it's really expensive there.
Yeah.
And he ended up getting a job at University of Houston in digital media. And so that's when we had to move to Houston because California was so expensive. We could not afford to live there anymore. So
I don't know how much you know about this, but as a follow-up question, like, did he ever talk about like the casting process for like Jiminy Cricket and how he got that role, or was it a connections thing, or was it an agent thing, or?
It might have been an agent thing, or just the fact that we were in LA made it much easier for him to be on location, and Disney likes it when you're on location.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that's it was such a long time ago that
Oh yeah, maybe we should
I'd have to
your
ask
dad
him
on the
about
podcast. That might be an interesting podcast.
Maybe so. But in the end, that's kind of all. My parents were more like indie kind of creators in their own way. They never really got the chance to like pitch shows and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to ask them more about that because a lot of that stuff happened when I was very young. But by the time I wanted to kind of pitch my own show, my options were very limited because I did not have any kind of agent to help me get into these companies and be able to pitch to them. The only two companies.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to keep on asking you to translate. So can you kind of just talk about what an agent is and kind of the advantage of that? Yeah.
So an agent is basically someone who represents you to a company. They're the one that has a lot of the connections to specific companies, and they kind of pitch you as a person to different places and be like, okay, I think you should check this person out. In my experience, this person is someone you'll probably want to hear from. They think they're like the middleman basically to be someone that the companies can trust and that hopefully you can trust.
Right. And there's also a layer of protection there because there's there's a buffer, so there's less because I'm sure you've been burned by it too, but I've been burned a lot. I don't know if you know a lot about it, but when especially when you're talking to people via the internet and via Skype and stuff like that, there can be people might get the wrong read on you, and then they might sit on it, and all these neurodivergents together just basically bubble into. So anyway, agents help with that, and they also,
yes,
from my understanding, from an outsider's perspective, the more reputable the agency is, if you get in, quote unquote, then having their say of hey, this person is reputable because we've seen them talent, they are professional, they'll show up. That goes a long way, and that's how kind of the game works in Hollywood, from my understanding. So.
Exactly, and so they're the ones that help you get your foot in the door. But then you also have to be able to get your foot in the door by getting picked up by an agent. So there's a process there. I had tried to get picked up by a literary agent 2 different times when I was when I completed my first book, Dragon Queen Scarlet Rain. I had done what is called a it's kind of like a pitch letter, basically. There's a more specific word for it. But when you do an agent pitch letter for a literary agent, you have to try to describe who you are as well as the synopsis of your book in a really an interesting way that'll catch their eyes, because they get hundreds and hundreds of emails asking to be represented by writers. And so you have to make it really stand out and pop. And there's a lot of really good videos on that subject on YouTube as well. So you write out what your book is about, who you are, and then they generally ask you to give a PDF or Word document of the first few chapters of your manuscript. And then from there, they will read it over and either get back to you or don't get back to you. It's more likely they will not get back to you because they get a lot of emails. So what I had done was I sent out hundreds of emails to different literary agents. I would specifically use literary agent websites, and I would look up what books that they're looking for. A lot of literary agents are specific about which genres they represent. One agent might be really into fantasy, sci-fi, westerns, for example, and they might only want to see manuscripts in those genres. Or you might get a Christian fiction only type agent, or perhaps a romance only type agent. So you have to make sure that what you're pitching to them is something that they'll be interested in. And I had done this for both Dragon Queen and Spectral Lakes, and unfortunately both of them, despite all the emails I sent out, no dice on getting an agent. So from there I had to self-publish them. And that's a similar case when it comes to video games. when it comes to video games, you don't need an agent, but you do tend to need a publisher. Even indies would do well to get a publisher if they can. I haven't reached out to that many publishers when it came to Mariposa, but that's because Mariposa, which is my platforming game project I had done a Kickstarter for, that one would have taken a lot of money to fund, so it wasn't very what's the word, enticing to publishers, because it was a big project, and I'm relatively unproven as I didn't have a published game out yet. And so, I mean, by all accounts, even though I feel like my presentation was very professional, and we had a whole 2-hour demo with like gameplay and story and full voice acting and all of that stuff, to a publisher, it's still very risky. And so for Mariposa, when the Kickstarter didn't work out, and when publishing didn't seem to work out, and as well as the AT&T contest, we weren't able to get the prize on that one. At that point, there wasn't much left for us to do except try something else. And so that's when I went and my team and I started working on the Fantastic Kitty Roo, which was a much smaller game, but that was set in the same like universe as Mariposa. So we could start to kind of build this universe, this story world that has like these different planets and characters. And so the Fantastic Kitty Roo ended up being like a short kind of 2-hour visual novel game / rhythm game that was meant to tell the backstory of one of the characters that would appear in Mariposa. So we thought having this game out would be a good way to show people that we can make a finished product, and that we are more that we are someone that can be invested in because we finished it, you know. And so in a similar vein of finding an agent, if you are in the writing literary space, finding a publisher is a similar thing of creating a pitch document, sending out emails, trying to find someone that would like to take a chance on you. But what's different from finding a literary agent is that generally publishers seem to like having like a whole pitch document, which is kind of similar to what you do with pitching a TV show, which I've also had experience with when it comes to Spectral Lakes, because since I didn't have a literary agent, there were only 2 places I could find that I could pitch Spectral Lakes to. Spectral Lakes is my like IP that is basically a supernatural ghost mystery story, a la like sort of like a more adult Gravity Falls type of thing. And what I had done was I made a pitch document, and in that document you make basically a bunch of character sheets talking about your characters, what their arcs are, what will happen to them. You have sample episode pitches where you have like a synopsis of different episodes and what's going to happen in each of them and how the story progresses from there. You have like maybe animatics, you show the themes of your story, what everything's about, and you try to kind of put it in this kind of PDF booklet that has like this nice aesthetic that reflects your show, and just overall just have a nice looking document. And so I was able to pitch on Adult Swim's like little rapid pitch session. They would basically do these live streams where they would have a couple Adult Swim employees there that would you would submit your document to them and then get on a call with them, and you would present your TV show idea, and they would see if they liked it or not.
How would you how do people in general, I don't know if it's still a thing, but like how would you sign up for that if it was still a thing?
I don't know if it's still a thing or not, but I remember the way I signed up for it was I believe they had like a submission document on their website for it. Yeah. Which is why I was able to actually do it, because I didn't have the agent. They have this opportunity to like live stream pitch to them. I remember it was really cool seeing the comments of people being like, "Oh, this seems interesting," and like their chat, and like, "Oh, this seems pretty cool. Oh, I want to see this as a show."
I mean, I guess this says more about like either the openness of Adult Swim or the desperation of like, we need good ideas and no one has any good ideas. Let's just open it to the crowd, you know.
In hindsight, I'm not a very experienced person, and I hadn't been hired in the animation industry at all. All I had was a pitch and a dream. So I can see why I wasn't picked up. You know?
Speaking of a pitch and the dream, I'm linking you for later. Here's a trailer for the game I was talking about. We can talk about
sweet.
It. Yeah. But yeah, it's on Steam.
Thanks so much.
It's only like $10, so I think you'd enjoy it. So
awesome, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoyed Edith Finch.
Yeah, it's not as morbid per se as Edith Finch. She doesn't have those same types of more, like a little bit, but not as like, it's not like a kind of ghost story like Overcast, like even though Edith Finch isn't a ghost story per se. Mm-hmm. It's more about someone who has a complicated relationship with their mother and kind of just what to do about that, going forward through the plot. So, and then you get backstory and, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That sounds very cool.
Oh, and let me tell you, like, the transitions, like, there's the flashback transitions, I was, like, screaming because they were tracking shots, but, like, from different points of view, so you were, like, jumping around it was really cool. Anyway, you're like...
Yeah. That's so cool.
So, let's talk more about your 3D art. So, because you've graduated school by now, right? Like.
Oh yeah.
yeah. It's I just turned 30 this year, and it's not fun. I mean, it is fun, but like at the same time,
yeah.
like, oh man, I'm not 21 anymore, man.
It's hard, dude. Yeah, I just turned 25 on Monday. Woo.
Whoa. That was my most popular tweet when I turned 25. My friend and my parents got me like all like Rainbow Dash or pony themes, and it was a tweet that I did make up the dialogue for fun, but I felt like it was worth it. Where like in my room, like in the kitchen, there's just like that big Rainbow Dash balloon that's like shaped like her, as well as a couple other ones. And then I wrote I was like, the cashier at the store was like, "Hey, so how old is your daughter turning?" And then my parents are like, 25. So, I felt like that was too, I mean, I did write that, but I felt like it was too good of a joke not to share. But I think that's my most popular tweet ever. So there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, obviously you don't have to share where you went to school unless you're comfortable, but I guess I'm not really a 3D animator per se. I don't really have any. I feel like I've learned too much. I don't want to add Maya to my plate. Maya scares me, but if you want to talk about like what Maya is and your experience with like learning it via school or on your own, and kind of the advantages, the pros and cons of 3D animation in general, and if you want to go into that.
Oh yes. So in terms of 3D, I learned it while I was in college. That's kind of one of the reasons I really wanted to go to a school that had a game art program, because it was something that I felt was too overwhelming to learn on my own from home without... Yeah. Because it's like a whole new world and a whole new way of thinking when you're learning 3D art. And I was someone who only knew how to do 2D stuff. So the way we started was by using 3ds Max, which is an Autodesk program. Autodesk also owns Maya. So we started by using 3ds Max, and they would show us how to use like primitives, which are basically like the shapes that you have like at the start of the program, like a basic sphere, a basic cube, etc. How to turn those primitives into full-on shapes and models, and using extrude, which is like extracting a piece of a model outward, like you're pulling it out. And I ended up finding that while it was very overwhelming at first, it ended up all clicking together and making sense the more I studied it. And so while we started learning in 3ds Max modeling, one of my other teachers preferred to use Maya, and he was our rigging and animation teacher. And so we learned modeling in 3ds Max, and then we learned animation in Maya. So these were the tools I was comfortable with. But as soon as I graduated...
I don't mean to interject, but I have my joke being, it's like, sounds like 3D animation, but with extra steps.
Yeah. And from what I understand, Maya is the standard in most animation companies like Disney, Pixar, and like Across the Spider-Verse was animated mostly in Maya, from what I understand.
Yeah. From what I gather, it's Maya, and then sometimes they develop programs in studio for specific things like hair, and I think that's what.
Oh yeah.
I think that's what happened with Moana, is they couldn't get the hair like falling correctly, so they just sort of like, well, just develop our own like rigging tool thing for that. And I'm like, okay, good for you, Disney. I'm glad you have the money to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Because speaking of which, like, when you're an indie, there's so much problem solving you have to do on your own. It's scary. It's very scary. And there's sometimes problems that it feels like you cannot get over. And that's when you have to get help. I recommend highly that anybody who's interested in making indie games or doing technical stuff, that they join Discord groups that are specialized in this stuff, because they usually have these like help chat lines that can depending on if someone has an answer for you, they will usually help you. And it's helped me in the past solve major issues that I thought were impossible, but then some guy comes along and he's like, hey, try this, and I'm like, whoa, that fixed it. Wow.
Yeah, and that, from my end, that seems to be a big advantage of the team, and like a lot of people from the outside look in, just seem like, oh, she just does it because she doesn't want to do things. And I'm just like, no, I do it most like, because my mental health is horrible, and like I just need help, but also like just with keeping things going. But the other part being, the collaboration, I think it makes the content better, as well as if we run into problems, you're not just like, a sitting duck. You have other people that can kind of walk you through it. So, so everyone kind of learns that way, and it's knowledge they couldn't get on their own. So I think I agree with you.
Exactly. And I know I will say too, like, we have run into some criticism on some of the games I've worked on, like Mariposa and Fantastic Kitty Roo. We've gotten comments that are along the lines of, like, some of these animations are uncanny, or, like, the characters look a bit strange because of the animations, that kind of thing. And it's completely understandable, because I'm the only person working on it who's animating.
Oh,
and because of that,
child.
yeah.
I saw, like, I went through your art on Twitter, and it's great. But like, you're also only one person, so sometimes you just need that feedback,
Yeah, and it's good feedback to have. But it's also in the back of my mind, I'm like, they're right, but also I don't have the time to fix this sometimes. Sometimes I have to just get it out there, and I don't have enough experience to make it like super pretty professional looking, because I am still learning on this stuff. And the really tough part and the difference between animation for games and animation for TV shows or movies is that one of them is locked and done when it's done. As in, once it's rendered and out, you are only seeing it from one direction, one camera angle, and you can use post-processing stuff to like paint, like, for like Across the Spider-Verse, they painted over certain stuff, like to add lines to it and all that jazz. So they have the opportunity to look at it as a 2D image when they're finishing it. When you're doing game animation, you have to have animations that look good from conceivably every angle you can think of. And not only that, but they have to be able to blend into other animations on the fly and hopefully look good. So, and then you have like animations that will layer on top of other animations. For example, you have a running animation, and then maybe the character will shoot a gun in one hand, but still keep running as they're doing it. You have to have where the animation layers over the running animation and overwrites the joints or the bones on the arm of the character, and has it so that animation of the shooting the gun is overlaid on top of the animation of running. And so there's a lot of like technical stuff you have to overcome because you're animating for a ton of different eventualities and a ton of different situations, which is why it's so tough as compared to animating a character from one angle for one shot for a TV shot.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. I mean, and that's the thing too. Like sometimes people who want to be in animation, or people who are like, let's make this cartoon, and like they don't really understand the genius of like basically being able to control everything in the space with animation, and they oversimplify it because they associate it with Disney nostalgia. And I'm just like, no, don't do that. So like I think there definitely needs to be a bigger space for animators who are also storytellers, so they like know what the fuck they're doing. Like Spider-Verse is a very happy accident of like from what I know, the Chris Lords, they're not animators themselves, but they respect the art so much that they're willing to learn and listen to other animators and what they have to say. And we need more of that. We don't need any more live action Lion Kings. It hurts my soul.
Yep. Agreed.
But
yeah. That you also have to worry about importing your skeleton and animations into a game engine. Because when you're, again, working in movies or TV, you don't have to ever worry about importing it to another program. I mean, at least ideally. I believe there might be situations where you'd have to do that. But with gaming, you have to be importing whatever you're making into the game engine, and there can be tons of issues and problems that come with that. Specifically on Mariposa, my programmer Caius and I ran into huge issues when it came to the animations and skeletons working properly, and we had to find these tools that were made by like different people online and put those tools to use. And there's this miracle worker on YouTube who provides great tutorials on using Blender specifically and rigging. I believe his name is CG Dive, like diving into the water, CG Dive. He's a great asset for anybody who wants to learn to rig in Blender and take those rigs and animations into Unreal Engine and Unity. In fact, speaking of Blender,
I was gonna be because I was wondering if you had more insider knowledge, because for those who don't know, Blender is an open source program and Maya is not. So there's always kind of the I'm just waiting for the day that some studios just like, fuck it, I know it's going to cost more in the short term, but it's going to save us so much money in the long term if we just make everyone switch from Maya to Blender. And then Maya's like, oh no, the money. And I'm like, oh no, that's what you get for being an asshole. So
that's pretty much exactly what happened to me as soon as I graduated. Because once I no longer, technically, like, you still have the student license, but the thing is, legally, whatever you make in Maya or 3D Coat when you have a student license you're not able to use it in commercial works. So I immediately was like, if I'm making a video game, if I'm going to make a video game, I can't use these programs for it. So I switched to Blender, and it was so painful. As someone who is still relatively new to 3D, I'd only been learning it at like 2 years at that point. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to learn another completely new program from scratch. And yes, I did have to, because Blender is free.
Well, good for you. Clap, clap. You were committed to your art. Clap, clap.
Oh yeah, it was hard. I was like doing those Blender tutorials, trying to figure out all these strange new hotkeys and everything, and having to relearn a whole bunch of stuff.
No, I get it. I'm trying to learn. I'm still trying to get good with Toon Boom, and it's hard, and that's like still relatively in my comfort zone. So like, I'm just like, can I just do frame by frame? That's just easier. I don't have to think about it. I can just draw.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, and but the cool thing with Blender is not only that it's free, but all of the add-ons you can get for it are insane. They're so cool. And Blender is getting better and better with every update. And now they basically have a 2D animation software
Slam them in the
now.
ground, Blender. Kill Maya. Do
Yes!
it. Slay Queen.
Yes, it's so great that the free option is such a powerhouse. It's really great. I love Blender.
I mean, and that's kind of the general, like, that's one of the reasons Disney has been a staple as much as they had, especially because, like, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, but, like, it's technically more relevant here. So I've been watching the Imagineering documentary. I watched it once, so I'm rewatching it, and they talk about, like, Animal Kingdom, and they have Jane Goodall as like a creative consultant, whatever you want to call it, and they're, like, really committed.
I watched that. It was so good.
Yeah, and then you, like, and there's a lot of, like, they're trying to do it with integrity. They're trying to do it with the animals need to be, like, the animals are the most important thing, and then, you know, if we build a park around it, cool, but, like, they're the priority, you know, and we'll never put the health of the animals in risk for, you know, dancing, you know, for amusement, you know, to make them mad. And then, we just came back from a Disney trip, and my mom's like, we should go to SeaWorld, and I'm like, no. And she was still like, why did we go to SeaWorld? And I'm like, well, let me show you a little film that I hadn't seen all of it, but just bits of it, but I showed her Blackfish. And for those who've never, have you seen Blackfish?
I have, yes.
For those who don't seen Blackfish, like, so take exactly what I just said about Animal Kingdom and do everything that is not that, and basically torture the animals for the amusement of the monies and, you know, other things. Like, they talk, like, not to be too crude, but they do talk about how they have to extract semen from the killer whale so they can breed it with the other killer whales to get more killer whales to make more money. So, you know, don't do that. So that's kind of, like, SeaWorld took a big hit from that. Like, you know, but they deserved it. Fuck them. Like, it's not something that should have happened at all in the first place. And, like, the fact that they're even still alive as a corporation after that is, like, amazing. But I imagine they had to do, like, so much, because they were very whatever, but they were very hesitant to admit there were any problems, you know, even internally from what, you know, the movie took. It's free on YouTube if you want to go see Blackfish and cry for, like, 10 minutes. But it's a good education, kind of like, oh no, kind of thing. Oh no, humans are barbarians after all. But yeah, like, so I'm even, like, you know, even like even though SeaWorld still exists, even though they don't have their orca show, like, they still have the dolphins, and they still have the manta rays, and they still have, like, just general fish themes. It's hard to support an organization that was just basically doing the wrong thing for so long, and then eventually the only reason they changed is because they got called out on it, and even that change was just like, well, sales are down, I guess, you know, it's the weather. And I'm just like, no, it's not the weather. Like, are you that, like, up your asses as far as your morality? Like, it hurts me. Anyway, so I didn't mean to make this about SeaWorld. But
no, that's okay.
Okay. So, you know, but I guess back to Maya, like, if you kind of lead with just, like, hey, you know, we just want to be helping the artists, and, like, it's not about, like, Adobe's like this too, where it's just like, it's just too embedded in the studio, and YouTube in general is like this too. Like, it's just too embedded in the culture, and the studio mindset. Like, YouTube, like, you can't. There's no competition for YouTube. Like, you know, there's Daily Motion, but you're not going to go. And TikTok's been the closest thing to actual competition to YouTube, like, ever, and Vine before that. But generally, you're not gonna, like, you know, with the exception of TikTok, like, you're not gonna go viral by putting a video on fucking Daily Motion. Like, it's just not gonna happen.
Oh yeah.
So, because Google, you know, Google owns it, and Google owns the world. Google and Disney own the world, and a couple other ones.
Yep.
But yeah, but if you lead with good intentions, like, you know, Blender's just like, we just want to give artists access to the art. It's not about the money. Then, you know, but people are like, well, you know, you lead with love, baby. And when you lead with love, then people are like, like even Tommy said this on the last podcast. Like, I gave them $30, not because I had to, because I wanted to, because they developed this great program for me for free. Like, and fuck Maya. And I'm just like, yeah, fuck them. So it's just a matter of some bold studio saying like, hey, we're kind of tired of like, and DaVinci Resolve is on the rise too as far as editing Adobe stuff. And the biggest, for those who are listening, with like, there's the Adobe Suite, which is like editing stuff, and then the pinnacle of Adobe Suite is called Avid, which is basically like, it's like Adobe, except multiple editors can be working on the same project at the same time and just everything sync together. So when you're working on a multi-editor project on a big studio thing, then that's the most optimum use of like the time that you have. So everyone can be kind of collaborating in real time on the same thing. So, and then there's like a tracker. I don't know if you know the tracker thing, but there's another one that's better for like 3D and tracking shots. Tracker coder, something. It's not trap.
Oh yeah.
Do you know? Anyway, so there's.
I'm afraid I don't.
Yeah, there's one out there, but that's generally how it works. But DaVinci Resolve, I think, is solidifying, which is also an open source. Like, you get extra things if you pay for it, but you can also just use it for free. So DaVinci Resolve is fine tuning their big production thingy-abob, their big production machine, and So they're fine tuning that, and it's I think it's going to give Adobe a run for its money, rightfully so, because like the fact that you have to pay for a subscription renewal is just like gross. Yep. And then especially like the situation you described where you have all these art students using it as a student license, and then if they have to work indie, then they just don't have access to the thing they spent 3 years learning. It fucking sucks,
Oh my gosh, yes. Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, but yeah, like, I guess as far as my technical understanding, it seems like, making puppets in any kind of 3D atmosphere is basically about negative space, and it's basically like sculpting in a 3D environment. Is that correct?
Oh, in terms of like making the models?
Yes.
Yeah, it's basically like, there's two ways to really go about modeling in 3D. One is box modeling, which is basically using your mouse and keyboard to take a basic primitive like a cube and turn it into whatever you're going for. You basically you move points around, you extract, push, pull all around this model until you get the shape that you're looking for. This method is usually best for inorganic objects like trees. Well, no, not trees, that's organic, but like as in non-character type shapes. Yeah. Like you can use it, a lot of people use it for trees and for furniture, houses, vehicles, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like landscape, I imagine too, right?
Yeah. But it can also be used for characters. It's just that it can be a bit tougher. It's just a different type of skill set in terms of modeling. My preferred method for characters is starting with a sculpt. Now, sculpting in 3D is pretty much just like sculpting with clay in real life, except you have Command Z and you can crash.
You want to define Command Z, or should I?
Oh yeah, Command Z just is a command you can do on your keyboard, pressing or Control Z on Windows, that undoes whatever you just did in your program.
Yeah,
it's super helpful.
I got into digital art like way later than I should have, because I didn't know that you could just get an iPad and just do it on. Like, I knew all these 14-year-olds had access to something, but because I was basically trained traditionally for most of my artistic life, and then now I'm pretty comfortable with drawing digitally, and sometimes when I'm drawing traditionally, which is what you do when you're at conventions, because people want to keep the traditional art. And that's also kind of the only time you're drawing traditionally, unless you're just doing it for lulz or doing it because you're bored or something like that. But I've caught myself like several. I don't know if do you use Procreate, Anya?
I do, yes.
Okay,
yes.
I don't know if you've done this before, but have you ever caught yourself trying to Control Z like on your traditional work, and you're just like, oh wait, no, I can't do that.
Yeah. Because like in Procreate, you can like tap the back arrow to undo it. But sometimes when I'm sketching in real life, most of the time actually when I'm sketching like on a sketchbook, I'll accidentally try to zoom in by pinching my fingers out. That's the most common thing for me is catching myself doing that.
Oh my god, I relate on a spiritual level. Okay. Well, I think we're near the end. Are there any other tips or tricks like you'd like to share with the class about anything? Like it doesn't just have to be about 3D, but just general anything.
Oh yeah. For when it comes to modeling for games versus TV and movies, games usually will need a lower poly count. Poly count means the number of faces on the object, like the number. I'm sure many of you have seen a behind-the-scenes looks at games or shows when you see the wireframe of a character model, where there's basically a ton of lines all over it. Those lines each represent a face that is making up the character, and the more faces there are on the character, the higher the poly count is. The higher the poly count, the harder it is for the computer to render it. So if you're making a game which is real-time rendering, which means the computer is rendering it as you are playing it, that is much harder to do with higher poly count. It just makes the computer have to do more calculations. With animation for TV and movies, however, because the computer renders it slowly, one frame at a time, before making it into a video file, you don't have to worry about poly count nearly as much. So depending on what you're modeling for, you're going to have to worry about poly count or not. And that is stuff you'll have to look up more on your own because it's too complicated to get into without pictures. And I guess as a last little topic in terms of like marketing, I guess that's kind of like the final step when talking about game art and stuff, is don't give up, never surrender. Keep pushing at it. Get your indie game out there. Try to find any resources you can. Lord knows that's what I'm doing too right now. Trying to find. There are resources like the different directs, like Nintendo, which is a game company. They do this thing called the Nintendo Direct, and that is a little presentation where they show the upcoming games on their platform. But there are also indie game directs that some people do. One of them is, I believe, the Wholesome Game Direct, and they specifically do indie games that are wholesome or cute in nature. So, and I believe there are also other kinds of indie game directs as well that have been going on. So I recommend anybody wants to get their indie game out there, feel free to look at that. I also recommend looking into the Steam Next Fest. That is a Steam Valve kind of a fest event where you submit a demo for a game you've been working on the Steam store, and then they'll have that featured as part of their Next Fest to show what games are coming up, and there's a lot of indie games that can be part of that. I would recommend, if you're going to do a Kickstarter, really research into it. Again, Lord knows I had to. And I'm going to again because I'm working on another Kickstarter that will hopefully be the banger this time.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. So really research into that. Look into Kickstarters that were successful and look into ones that failed and try to figure out why. And that's kind of the advice that I have.
Guess I'll die. But I'll just end too. This is just something I noticed that I didn't really have time for, but I don't know if you realized it too, because it just seemed like we were just too busy. But I was at Delta H this year, and I saw you, and I just didn't have time to say anything.
Oh, I think I did see you too, and I also was like, oh, what? Oh, she's there. Cool. I
was
didn't
like,
have
wait a
time.
minute.
That was like last year, right?
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like
that was. I think that was last year. Oh yeah, I remember that. I think too. I do. Yeah, we just didn't get the chance to really say hi. That's unfortunate.
It happens for sure. But all right. I guess we will end the thing. So hi people who listen to the podcast. Thanks for getting this far. We have a lot of podcasts about podcasty things. So if you like animation or art or my comedy TM, then feel free to listen to some more. I think, again, this is episode 80 something. So we have a good, backlog of podcasts if you want to learn just about anything. But we can't, visually show you because it's a podcast. I mean, we could probably do a YouTube version of it, sometime, but, we just haven't done that. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So, Anya, where can people find your socials?
You can find me on InkRose98 on Twitter and Instagram, and my website is inkroseinc.com. It's spelled I-N. Yeah, it's spelled I-N. Yeah, it's a little pun, but it also is a little confusing because they're like, which version of ink? So it's INKROSEINC.com.
Yeah, maybe if you made it possessive, if you made it Ink Roses Ink, maybe that.
Oh, yeah.
That way they know the ink you're talking about. And the only other thing I think about is maybe it was a coincidence, maybe it was not. But remember, in season 7 or 8, there was the Inky Rose character that showed up, and I'm just I don't know, guys.
I know
it's a little bit too on the nose for it to be a coincidence, yo.
Yeah, and the fact that they had to call her Inky Rose instead of Ink Rose makes me wonder if they had looked up Ink Rose previously and were like, oh, we can't use that one, because I had already had it copyrighted, I think, at that point, or trademarked. And
yeah, I think too it might have been a thing where they just she was named Ink Rose, and then they realized near the end they're just oh shit, that's copyrighted, we gotta change it slightly so we don't get sued by this person in Texas. So
this person who has no money.
Well, that's how you get money, girl. You sue.
That's true. Oh man, if only they'd named her Ink Rose.
Yeah, if only. I mean, that happened too with the Coco Pinnell thing, because I think that was copyrighted, and they had to change it to Miss Pinnell from now on. I'm just I get it, but and
I would like to think that they were inspired by my name, but you never know.
Yeah, that's an insider baseball kind of question that maybe you can ask the right person about. And then the only other one off the top of my head is for Don Bluth's Secret of NIMH, they had to change Mrs. Frisbee to Mrs. Brisby because of Frisbee being a thing that was copyrighted. I don't know if you knew that, but that's your fun fact for making it all the way to the podcast. Thanks everyone. And then, so in case you don't know me, then I love Kim Possible a lot and Rachel sometimes. So main channel, we're gonna start releasing content relatively regularly soon. So, and good content, we're working hard to make sure it's very tight. So, keep an eye on that. We just released that we're not going to make it the normal content, but we released a fun video of me reacting to cringe Kim Possible fan art blindly. So hopefully that's entertaining to people, I guess. God knows it took forever because there was a lot of production issues with people kind of coming and going, which is the nature of nonprofit, but it's still emotionally draining to be well, I guess we got to give it to someone else. I guess we got to figure this out. So as I'm sure, Anya, the hustle as far as that. But
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, Anya. Hopefully your knowledge helped the children or the children at heart or whoever's listening. And, hopefully, if you're new to the podcast, you stick around. And obviously, please support the main channel and support all the guests and support all the things. I'm not even asking for money right now. Just comments, it's free. Just press a button. I see you out there, Karen. If you know how to YouTube, you know how to subscribe. So,
and thank you so much for having me on the podcast. By the way,
coming. I'm glad it worked out. I kind of wasn't sure, because the girl lady who she was just I asked this person, I think they'd be a good fit. I'm just oh yeah, that's a good fit. I haven't talked to her in a hot minute, but yeah, sure. That sounds fine. So
It's nice to touch
yeah,
base,
yeah,
you know?
like, oh yeah, we still exist. We're not just like, back in the before times. And then I also want to explain the Ink Rose is a witch joke. So for the class. So for when Ink talked about how she got viral from that one video where, like, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like you narrating like a slideshow, right?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And I think one of the reasons it got so popular is because, like, it ended up, like, a lot of kids watched it, like, and it ended up getting in like, a lot of kids, like, recommended, because they would, like, look up, like, pony backstories and stuff. Especially, I think that's what happened also with, like, the Applejack video I made and, like, the Discord backstory. Mm-hmm. Like, they would just, like, look up that stuff because they were curious about it, and then my videos would pop up as, like, the first thing. So that, I think that ended up being why they got so viral.
Yeah, and then people, the kiddos don't realize that, just someone on the internet, like, a headcanon and, that kind of thing. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But, like, so back in the day, we'd make fun of Ink Rose because, like the show would basically the My Little Pony show itself wouldn't get that many views on sometimes. Like, I think it averaged like maybe 1 million views per, like, I mean, granted, your videos were lifetime views, and, like, I think the pony show were just premiere numbers only. But people were just like, what? How is she doing it? She's a witch. She must be a witch. So Ink Rose is, so I think it was in what was it? I know it was in Serpent's Tail, and then I know it was in, what was the other one? The Anthony's thing where he's Tall Tales or whatever the fuck. Yes. Yeah. Yep. So
there was, like, a whole bit of me getting, like, about to be burned as a witch or something. Good times.
It was blast from the past. So I hope you got your nostalgia filled. But anyway, thanks for listening to the podcast. Go check out some new content. Go get your homework done, fams. And hope to see you next time in the space or the time, or in the past or in the future, wherever you're listening to KP, because it's recorded. So I could technically be dead right now. You wouldn't know. So hopefully I won't be, but all right.
Have fun, everyone.
Have a good evening, night, day, whatever. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to Animation Communication on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting provider. We are really hoping the show makes a difference in how people view animation, as well as media as a whole, as well as giving and providing advice for people all over the world who like and want to join the animation and media industry. If you like what you heard, please remember to show support by giving a like, a follow, rating those 5 stars, as well as subscribing to our main I Love Kim Possible a Lot channel on YouTube, and turn your notifications on. New episodes of Animation Communication come out every Wednesday at 6 a.m. EST on podcasting platforms and 4 p.m. EST on YouTube. You can follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at the KP Podcast for information on upcoming guest episodes and more, as well as our hosts KP and Lyle Convoy at I Love KP a Lot and at Lyle Manbad on social media. I'm Lucy, and thank you for being a part of our community. See you next time on Animation Communication.